Hi, everyone. This is an exciting day for a couple of reasons. The first of which, this is the last lecture for our short accelerated class. And the second reason is this is the lecture that your state legislature warned you about. This is the woke lecture. Sorry, I can't help myself. So I'm going to end by talking about some issues that the reason I like to include this in the film appreciation class is just because I see that these are the types of things that get discussed a lot in the pop press and in the news, and there's a lot of transition now. But what we're going to be talking about is the representation of various social groups in motion pictures, well, really media in general. And we'll be focusing a little bit on issues related to women, a little bit related to issues related to Black people, but um, just know that all of this stuff, like those are just, we've got limited time. So I just picked those because there's a lot of research on those groups, but all of these things apply to all sorts of groups. So the first important, the first important thing that is hard to summarize in a PowerPoint slide, but I'm going to try is I just really want to I want to get the basics of hegemony out of the way and just sort of explain what hegemony is really quickly. Basically, hegemony is the just any sort of system of dominance. Oh, she loves a woke lecture. It's any sort of system of dominance over one of one social group over another. It's an ideological system of oppression, which basically just means that it's like ideas that people have about other groups that actually keep the whole system support, making sure that people in a position of dominance stay dominant and people who are in lesser positions stay in lesser positions. But the important thing I really want to bring up, because I just feel like this is the thing that you really only understand if you've had a college education where somebody tried to put this on a PowerPoint, is that um, hegemony is not something that is conscious. It's not something that people are usually doing deliberately. I mean, racism can be deliberate, but a lot of times, like when you hear, for instance, like the term institutional racism, what they're talking about is hegemony. They're just talking about how the way that the system of racism is, it just kind of works to support itself, and nobody's really trying to hurt anyone. It's just sort of like how the system runs. Um, Patriarchy, too, you can see here, it's like all of these things are just like sort of different forms of hegemony, a dominant group. Again, indirectly or not indirectly, but unconsciously oppressing a less dominant group. And the way this operates in the motion picture industry, but all of the media industry, as an example, is like I don't think anybody would claim that there's like a boardroom full of like white men who are like conspiring to keep other groups down or anything like that. That's not it at all. A critical perspective on all of this, and when I say critical, I just mean coming from what research on the ideology of hegemony, of different types of hegemony, would say is just like, no, it's just that people sort of naturally work to maintain the things they have. But unfortunately, the way that hegemony works is that's just going to maintain the existing power structure unless there's some sort of like disruption that comes in. But this process, and I have it highlighted here, right, is largely invisible and unconscious. Your textbook has a really nice way of putting it too, if you want to like read this quote here. It's really oh, and this is another important point too. Um, the power of any sort of hegemonic system is it includes everyone. So it's not, this isn't just like a problem that men have or white people have. It means that like as a woman, I'm part of the patriarchy too, and I do things to support the patriarchy. Again, not deliberately, but unconsciously, because that's just how it works. So, yeah, that's all. Sorry, I didn't do the best job. Again, you could take like a whole class and any of this, but I like to get that out of the way because I do think that when, you're talking about what's woke and everything, people seem to think that the accusation is that there are these sort of like types of conspiracies, but really this is just something that sort of happens. That said, because these systems of ideology just sort of like support themselves, you have to kind of like do things to break the status quo. And that's hard for a few reasons. One is because of money. So another like hegemony there, like capitalism. In order to break the status quo, you would have to say, like, well, gosh, it's true that like men tend to hire people like themselves, which is like a natural human thing to do. But how do we break that? Oh, maybe we should like hire more women directors or something like that. But then it's like, but will people want that? Are we ready for that? What if we lose money? If we try something new, when the system's already working, then we might lose money. So you have like those sort of conversations where people are concerned about profit margins, so they don't want to change. It's sort of like, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it's like, even if it is broke, let's not break it even more. Like there are these fears about and barriers associated with finances. Um, and then again, this is what I was sort of saying before. It is just really hard because, birds of a feather flock together. So when you're talking about trying to diversify any sort of institution, it's tough because the people who are doing the hiring and choosing who they want to work with and making decisions about what is comfortable for them are relying on their own sort of biases. And again, that's not anything that, suggests any sort of like nefarious intentions. It's just how it is. So, yeah, people just tend to want other people who are like them around. And so you got to break that up. Okay, normally I'm going to skip this because of limits on time and everything. You're welcome, but I still just I'm going to talk about some stereotypes and things in the media of both women and Black people very briefly because I just want you to know they exist. There's just different types of caricatures of women that sort of have been recycled over time. And although some things have gotten better, it's funny because you kind of see these manifest in different ways, like in new ways, like new but different. A lot of times women tend to be portrayed in a way that we'd associate with benevolent sexism, which is like women are pure, women are angelic, they're virginal or whatever, or they tend to, in a more hostile way, get portrayed in ways that like, and this is associated with like the femme fatale and stuff, that they're sinful, they're deceptive, they are gold diggers, they are, like they're either like too angelic or too evil, right? And this gets at this idea of like the Madonna horror complex, which is something again that we see in a lot of portrayals of women. And I just think it's interesting because it actually does reflect some psychological uh, some things that we know about sexism and psychology. Um, I'm going to skip this, but these are some archetypes that you can see where this is actually like has been manifested in history. But I want to stop here, and this is the stuff that I really want you to I really want you to know. Um, and another sort of issue that we've seen in terms of how women have been portrayed was an observation by a film theorist named Laura Mulvey in 1975. And she wrote a paper on what's called the male gaze. And this was all about how film, when we are creating a movie and we have a camera, and we're using this camera to look at the characters on screen. Essentially, what we're doing is we're positioning the audience as if the audience is like their eyes are the camera. Here, let me put this differently. When you're watching a film, you are seeing things through the eyes of someone else. It's almost as if like the camera lens has become like this portal, such that you can, it's kind of like inside Herman's head or being John Malkovich, where it's almost as if like your brain is trained to see things as if like the camera is acting as your eyes and how to process things because it's directing you where to look, like your attention. And she says that the reason this can be potentially problematic is because a lot of the ways that the camera views women is in a very objectifying way. So think about how, and there's going to be some examples. You're going to have to watch the supplemental video where you know, you'll get a better idea from this from these examples. But even when I teach this and I just ask people like, hey, if you were going to make a movie and there was a hot woman who was like walking in the room and you wanted everybody to know she's hot, like how would you shoot her? People seem to inherently understand. It's like, well, I'd have the camera, start at her ankles and then pan up her body as if she's being looked up, right? She's being objectified. Like the whole idea is like you're supposed to focus on her body as this object to be gazed upon, right? And so, the reason as a film psychologist, the reason I think that's so interesting is because I think it speaks to the power of the camera to actually function as like an extension of our psyche. It really does train our brain in a way. But obviously, from like a film feminist perspective, it is problematic because it is like could be over time training us to treat the female form in a certain way. And if you're wondering, is this just about women? No, of course not. She was writing in 1975. That was her issue. This speaks to the ability of the camera to over time train us to look at anything as an object, right? So this can apply, I don't know if you're watching Magic Mike or something, for objectifying the male body too, right? So it's not just limited to women, but it is obviously, it was founded in thinking about how, a lot of male filmmakers were just sort of doing this without even thinking and positioning the audience as male gazers or whatever. Watch the video, it'll give you some examples to make a little more sense. Okay, on to another group. There's also a lot of media stereotypes and tropes of Black people that have gone throughout history and are really, it's a really interesting history because, again, just like women, it's like you don't see these things. You don't see the Uncle Remus stereotype and or the tragic mulatto in quite the same way that it looked 50 or 60 years ago. But these things do sort of like recycle. Um, an example, oh, did I have this? An example is like, oh, do I not have her? Oh yeah, there she is. The angry Black woman, she's still around. See what I did there? Some of these have gotten like a little bit better, but there's still like a lot of portrayals of, Black men as being hyper masculine, very violent. They tend to be cast as certain things. Again, I'm not going to get into all this. I'm just sort of like glossing over it. But the point that I really want to make with all of this, and if you're welcome to go back on my PowerPoints and click on some of the videos that I have in there too. There's little links embedded. Is that one of the things when we're talking about media portrayals in general is like how a group is portrayed. So we want to know like, oh, is that overly stereotyped? Does that portray them in a bad light? Does that objectify them? Does that blah, 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 blah. And one of the things that I think gets lost sometimes in these conversations is like, this isn't just about, is it like good portrayals or bad portrayals in terms of like, are you associating them with good things or bad things? Okay. The what people who are advocating for better portrayals of women or minorities are trying to do is make it so that the types of people that you see on TV are just complex. They're normal. They're not essentialized or stereotyped in any way. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, right? So, one of the films that I've occasionally, well, it's a TV show actually that I've shown in the past is a show called Swarm by Donald Glover, and it shows it's about a female African American serial killer. You don't get to see African American serial killers very often, let alone a female African American serial killer. She's not good, she's a serial killer, right? But it's like the cool thing is like she's able to sort of play that role. She can be messy, she can be weird, she can be all of these things that makes us all human. Not saying we're all serial killers, but the idea is just like certain people shouldn't be roped off from a portrayal because of it, they belong to a particular race or ethnicity. This is another, it was like an okay video. I'm not going to show it to you, obviously, but there's a YouTube video here about Issa Rae's character in her show in terms of like how she didn't get to see Black girls that were just like nerdy and like quirky and stuff like that. Okay, so now I want to drop some psychology on you because you know that's what I love to do. Why do we even care about these portrayals? That's what this question's going to, or that's what this part of the lecture is going to try to focus on. Like, why does it matter? Um, Several reasons, but one of them, also from the 1970s, was George Gerbner developed something called cultivation theory, and he was actually concerned with television. He was kind of like Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers was very cranky about TV. Even though Mr. Rogers was on TV, the reason he did that was because he was really mad at what he considered to be a vast wasteland of garbage on TV, that he wanted to put good things on TV. The concern was is that over time, if people are watching this idiot box, then they're going to come to have views of the world that mirror what they see on TV. And he basically started to test that by doing survey research and content analysis with the content on research, whatever. Take another class of mine and I can tell you more about that. But he did. He found evidence that over time, long over time, right? Not just like you watch like one show and it like, it shoots into your brain an idea, but it's like if you see the same thing over and over and over again, that does come to match your perception of reality. Now, it's even worse if, let's say, you don't have any other personal experience to negate it. So, let's say that I've never met a gay person before. Okay. And the only time I've seen a what gay people are like is by seeing them on TV because I don't have any gay friends. Then the television film, it becomes a much more influential source of information about gay people, right? So basically, cultivation's just saying that the more people are watching TV, the more consistent how they think of reality is going to be with what's on the television, as opposed to what actual reality is. So that's why portrayals matter, because um, if when I see Black people on TV, they're always violent, then my perception of what Black people are like in real life means that I'm going to think that they're violent. Okay, so that's one reason. It also affects self perceptions. If I don't see representations of my own group, I don't know, white women professors. Just joking. We don't ever get on TV. No, but it can affect what I think other people are going to think of me and also what I think of myself. So that's why the quality of representation matters. But another thing that matters is the quantity of representation. So, if I don't see people represented at all, then it also warps my perception of how, well, first of all, I won't get any information about a different social group, but it also informs me about how important a certain group is. And again, think about this from the self perspective. If you take this class in person, we would sometimes watch a episode of on in the show Master of None, which is a show that Aziz Ansari had on Netflix for several years, where he talks about what it's like to be a brown guy in Hollywood. So he talks about how when he was growing up, the only representations of Indian people that he saw were either played by like a white person or they were like terribly stereotyped, right? Like Apu on The Simpsons. And that was a problem for him because it limited his perception of what he could be. If you can't see it, it's hard to imagine how you could be it, right? But also culturally, there's this idea of symbolic annihilation. If other groups don't, it's almost as if like you're if groups aren't represent certain social groups aren't represented on TV, it's a way of sort of saying they don't matter or they don't exist. Another example of this is how most women on television are younger. Like it's as if like we don't want to see older women represented very much because once you get to a certain age, it's as if like you're just supposed to disappear. I mean, that's like a symbolic message of this. And so that's what it means that they're symbolically annihilated. And that can sort of affect our collective psyche too. So the idea, what we're sort of like going for is parity. We want, so think about the word disparity. Parity is when the representations we have in the media match actually what we have outside. It's not saying it should be more or less. It's supposed to say like quantitatively, in terms of numbers, we want to see older women represented in the same way that they're represented in real life. And we want our television perceptions to match our real life perceptions, right? But we have all these disparities. Even though Latinx people account for nearly 20% of the US population, they're not represented like that at all on TV. And this is kind of these numbers are from a few years ago, so they may have changed, but I know they haven't changed that much. Like the message is still the same. Although interesting, I mean, this is interesting. Black people actually are overrepresented compared to how common they are in the US population. But as I said before, it's like, yeah, so there are, quote, a lot of Black people on television, but the portrayals tend to be essentialized and stereotyped. So what we're trying to change there, of course, is like how they're represented. Um, so okay, last slide here. These are a couple things that these are actually terms that I have been hearing more in media reports, which I think is sort of promising. It's just good for our collective conversations, I think. Um, but there are also things I've been observing a lot in my own like sort of media diet. There is increasingly colorblind casting, which I think is great because, for years there was sort of this idea that it was like, well, okay, yes, we'd like to have more diverse casting, but we can't put an Indian guy in a Shakespeare role. And it's like, well, why not? If it doesn't take away from the narrative, right? If it doesn't distract people, then who cares, right? And I do think that we're seeing more of this. At the time that I'm filming this, which I don't know when you're watching this, but I love the Sandman comics, and I've been watching the Sandman. I'm not even going to get into the Gaiman stuff, but I love the TV adaptation of Sandman, and they've done a wonderful job with colorblind casting. And it doesn't take away anything to think that the white Sandman's sister is black. They're gods. They can be anything they want. She plays death, basically, in the like death as in like the Grim Reaper, that kind of thing, right? So a black woman's playing the Grim Reaper essentially, and she has a family of gods of varying races, and it's fine. It's actually pretty cool. Um, Game of Thrones is another example. They came off with like the Game of Thrones spinoff. What is it? House of Dragon, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, like the Targaryens, these blonde people can be black." And it's like, "Well, yeah, black people can have blonde hair too." So it's still like story consistent, and there's like black people in it, and it's like the story's still really good in my opinion. So that's color blind casting, where it's like it actually doesn't matter your race. Will work with you. Color conscious casting is this relates to genre subversion a little bit more, I think. This is where there's a deliberate attempt to sort of like break the rules of race casting for um, specific purposes of making some sort of commentary. So Hamilton's a great example of this. In Hamilton, people of color are put in the roles of founding fathers for for a very deliberate reason. It's to help us sort of imagine what that is and what that looks like, but also what the implications of that are, right? The complexity of race and ethnicity are actually sort of like part of what the theme of the production is trying to say, right? So that's sort of like a next level. Now, I want to say, like, these are just a couple of things I want you to be aware of. I want you to know the vocabulary and stuff. But oops, sorry about that. I assigned an article that you can click on. It's linked in your syllabus that talks about both of these things, but I don't want to oversimplify it. This article does a good job of saying like, yeah, so we're doing all these things, but there's also some cons about this approach that you should be aware of too. And I'm not going to get into it now because I know you want me to shut up. But if you're interested in any of this stuff, I really encourage you to read the article. It's only like 5 minutes. And yeah, but that's it. Congratulations. You have completed all of the lectures in this class. So have a good life. Bye.